Welcome visionaries, dreamers, and trailblazers to the Casually Ambitious podcast. I'm your host, Chase Price, and I am thrilled to embark on this journey with you. Here, we dive deep into the realms of wellness, entrepreneurship, and mindset. Let's build a life we love while loving the life we live. The adventure to a more mindful, purposeful, and casually ambitious life starts now. I'm surprised that you don't have a pod. You don't, do you?
I don't know. Yeah, it's something I want to do, but I got a lot of things I like to do. So
Sure.
kind of figuring out which one. I gotta make something a priority.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, every time we get together, we're all talking about all the things that we should be doing. I just saw you posted another YouTube video though, so obviously you're putting some time into YouTube.
Yeah, I want to start doing that. I feel like I spend a lot of time training and like filming my workouts for stories on Instagram, but the engagement's not really great and it doesn't live a long time. So I'm like, I'm gonna put a little bit more effort, make like an actual video where I can coach and do the things I want to do, and then it can stay on YouTube forever. I can grow that platform as well.
Is that where you have kind of gotten your start and your kind of gained some traction initially? Was it on Instagram?
Yeah.
Okay, and is that really just from some of your videos originally going viral? Because we'll get into this, but like Mike gone viral for like some wild shit, basically lifting heavy things in the Turkish get-up style, which I was not even familiar with. I think I saw it before I even met you. I'd seen one of your videos of you just raising one thing above your hand. I think it was the like squat rack type thing or something like that.
Oh yeah.
But is that kind of how you initially got some traction on social?
Yeah, it was through a lot of partner acrobatics, actually. So, like lifting other people in a handstand in my hands, lifting them up overhead, one arm type of stuff. Yeah, that's what originally grew it. And I was living in New York City at the time, and so there were a lot of influencers, athletes, coaches, acrobats. Zendaya, that yeah, trained her for a little bit, and then she put we were outside. I was training her for Greatest Showman, and we were outside of the gym afterwards, and I was telling her about this acrobatic stuff, and she's like, I want to try it. So I was like, cool. So I lifted her up in like the Dirty Dancing pose, and then her assistant filmed it, and I was like, hey, do you mind if I share this to the internet? She's like, no, share it. She's like, I'll share it too. You might get some followers. And yeah, she shared it, and I got like 25,000 followers that night.
Damn. That's wild.
But they were all 15-year-old girls. So it's slowly kind of been like unfollowing over time, I feel like.
Yeah, but it's awesome way to like kind of get some initial traction, and obviously, working with big names like that will help you grow the brand. So let's talk about that a little bit. How did you even get into this space of gymnastics, I guess is a good way to describe it, or how would you describe it?
Acrobatics, maybe.
Acrobatics, there's the word that I was looking for. Yes, thank you.
I got into that through yoga. So my athletic career was like a bunch of mainstream sports. My mom would say I never met a ball I didn't like. And then I got into Olympic weightlifting for college football. And then after that, I got
Where'd you play?
I played at a school called SUNY Cortland. I did D3 school. They just won the national championship actually last year.
Oh, sick. Shout out them.
Yeah,
SUNY Cortland. Never heard of them.
I know, yeah. They're like a little Division III powerhouse in upstate New York. And so, but after that, I got into yoga. And then through yoga, I got into hand balancing. So I would see like these yogis at the front of the class just like pressing up to a handstand, going to their chaturangas. And I thought that was like super cool and didn't even know that you could do that. And then I got into acrobatics from that. So one of the women in a class kind of like saw me doing my own thing, and I was bigger and flexible, and she was like, have you ever done acro yoga before? And I'd never heard of it, but we just went out to a park and started playing around with this book that she had of these different poses, and it was a lot of fun. And then from that, I got into the standing acrobatics, which is like more dynamic stuff where I could use my Olympic lifting background to like throw people in the air, and it's kind of maybe like cheerleading, but also not at the same time.
This beautiful blend of like strength training plus acrobatics, as you say, and there's not many people doing it, and you kind of translate it into lifts in the gym. And lately you've been kind of posting about having fun in the gym, being a kid in the gym, which I've leaned into a lot lately and just tried shit because, you know, as humans, we don't want to embarrass ourselves. We don't want to look like a dumbass in the gym, dropping some weight or doing something stupid and embarrass ourselves. But that's where we grow and you can actually do some pretty cool shit. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about your mindset about going into the gym and just trying some shit and getting uncomfortable, because I think you try and do that, you know, at least once a week, multiple times a week in the gym.
Totally. I mean, my background is in kinesiology, exercise science. So I have a good understanding of the body and the way it moves. And then I just like to challenge I like to challenge that and throughout different exercises that I'll find. What I really enjoy now is this whole idea of physical culture, which is started, I think, in Europe in like the late 1800s and then transitioned to America. And this is like the Bronze Age of weightlifting, like way before Arnold. This is when it was like you'd have strongman in circus that would travel from town to town, competing against other strongmen, putting on events you know, on a stage. Honestly, it was like a big form of entertainment. And there was a couple lifts that they would do back in the day. One was called the bent press, where you lift a bar up here and you kind of are bending down and getting under it, not necessarily pressing it. Another one was two hands anyhow, which is a fun puzzle, at least for me, where you try to lift two separate weights, or it can be, you can hold multiple weights, but they just have to be separate over your head. And you can get them from the ground to that position any way you want. So there's guys who will like bent press a weight up, pick up a kettlebell. This one guy picks up like two kettlebells in one hand, two in the other, and pushes them overhead. I do a clean and jerk, and then over to one hand, and then bend up and pick up a kettlebell and lift it. So um, through my hand balancing and yoga background, and then acrobatics, I'm very good at understanding how to keep my arms straight, and so I like testing that through like overhead lifts or pushes or different things like that.
Yeah, what kind of gym do you go to? Because it looks like super open and you can kind of do whatever you want and it's your playground, so to speak. So you're okay to kind of throw some random shit around and occasionally lift a rack above your head or whatever it is that day that you're lifted.
Yeah, I like CrossFit gyms and open gyms, ones that kind of let you do your own thing. Uh, so the gym I'm at now is a sports performance facility called Black Lab Sports in Boulder, Colorado. It's got a big open space with turf. They got yokes, different type of equipment, and they just honestly have space to express your physicality, which to me is really important. I want to be able to run and jump and skip and lift things overhead and push things and um, get out some of that like internal aggression that I have. That I think I used to, from my yoga background, I used to kind of think this isn't healthy to be so aggressive. And was almost like demasculizing myself by trying to not let that happen. And me personally, just the way I was built, I need to have that like physical pressure, whether it's from a bar or another person or something else. It helps ground me. And so having a space to express myself physically has been really critical.
I'm glad you brought that up. I feel like most gyms, at least open gyms, they just don't allow for space, obviously, because they're trying to maximize floor space for machines and whatnot and pack as many people in as they can for their retention and all that. But there's not space to just like be an athlete and like explore and kind of fuck around like the things that you do. And you kind of have to find a gym that has that approach or even has that opportunity. And most of those gyms probably are like CrossFit gyms, like you're talking about. I've never really been huge into CrossFit, but I love the idea of like open gyms and being able to explore and throw some shit around a little bit more freely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that one of my favorite gyms is my buddy Bo Ryan's gym. He That's his Instagram handle, by the way. I don't know why I called him by his Instagram handle. His name's Bo Dorning, but he lives in southern Denver. It's gym's called V23. And it's like a hybrid gym. It's not CrossFit per se, but it's not bodybuilding. It's more of a sports performance facility, kind of like Black Lab in Boulder. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely like wouldn't do well in a Crunch Fitness or a big box gym because I like to again have that type of space, and I don't feel necessarily the most comfortable in those types of spaces to do those types of lifts because they're not
Sure.
conducive to that. But um, for me, it's a vital part of my own health. So I have a gym in my garage as well, so I can do things there and invest in that.
Where do you get inspiration to try some of these moves? Is it something that you kind of do research on and see what other people are doing and throwing up, or is it something you just kind of come into the gym? You're like, I'm gonna figure something brand new out today and try this.
Yeah, good question. It's a combination of both, right? There's some that have been around for centuries, like some of those lifts I've described.
Mm-hmm.
And those were like the bench press of today. Like guys would go around and say, "Oh, what's your bent press?" or "What are you two
Yeah,
hand?"
it's funny you brought that up, the bent press, because I feel like if we all think about like circus and weightlifters back in the day, it's a guy in like a muscle tank and he's got like one hand lifted doing a bent press and he's yoked, but it's just like the singular weight he's lifting above his head is the image that I'm picturing.
Yeah, that was like the expression of strength. Is how much weight could you lift overhead with one arm?
Mm.
And so when people thought of lifting, that's where their brain went. Whereas now, if you say like, "What do you lift?" people might go to deadlift, bench press, or squat. Usually, because most people think of powerlifting, even if they're not even sure about weightlifting, which is its own different sport with snatch and clean and jerk. But yeah, like the other day I did Zerchers. You ever done Zerchers?
I don't even know if I know what that is. That's kind of like front squat with it in your
In your
like.
elbows.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I've
So,
never done it.
dude, gotta try those out. So it's a great challenge. Like if you think about it, it's in the front of your body, so it's similar to a front squat, but it's
Mm-hmm.
less technical because you don't have to have that mobility. Um, it's uncomfortable because the barbell's in the crooks of your elbows, and so it's not just like a comfy, seated leg extension or like curl machine. Like you have to kind of get into a different mental space in order to make that lift. But you can squat all the way down with it. You can pick the bar up off the ground with the elbows. It's like it will feel like a deficit deadlift. It'll probably feel like and look like a lot of things that people don't think are proper based
Mm.
on their mechanics. But personally, I feel like there's no such thing as necessarily bad movements. There's just improper bracing. And so if you can brace and create tension within your body, that's going to keep your spine and your muscles safe. There's just more risk if you all of a sudden are doing a lift and then you lose tension. That's when an injury can occur.
How do you train most of these movements as far as like, is it usually solo? Or do you have anybody else that you convinced like, hey, this is the way we should do some weird shit like this. Come lift with me.
Yeah. So it usually starts off solo. And then people in the gym will see kind of like what I'm doing. And you can see like the side eyes or the
Sure.
like what's going on. And they're in my opinion, I think people are curious. So if I see them either looking, I'll invite them over and be like, "Hey, have you ever done this before?" And then I make it approachable so they can have a successful time doing something different and not
Mm.
feel as awkward. And I build them up, put on a weight that I know they can do, and then they start to get into that challenge. I did the other day. I was doing one arm overhead squats, and this guy was just chatting me up like, "That's crazy! I can't even, you know, deadlift that or whatever." And I was like, "Try it. Like, let's put on 95 pounds at the bar, and I kind of teach him the technique and what I've learned." And then he did 135.
Hell yeah.
He's not a bigger guy. Maybe he's like a college distance runner. But it was cool for him to be like, "Oh wow, like I'm feeling this in all new places," and it just invigorates some more excitement in your body ultimately, which I think is a goal.
Absolutely a goal. And move in ways that you're not used to moving in, which is exciting. Once you get over the fact that you absolutely suck at it, it's so much fun to start growing in different capacities than you're used to. I know you have a couple world records. Which world records do you hold right now?
I'll come on that one second. It's a beginner's mindset, right?
Mm.
I'm sure you're familiar with, but it's like allowing yourself to start something new and not have an expectation for it. And that's really the key. If you don't have an expectation for what you can or should be doing in this lift, then you can be like a child who's just starting something new. They're really exciting about painting. They don't know that their finger painting isn't going to go in a museum. They just like the act of finger painting. And so if you can get into that space, it can bring out that childlike curiosity and wonder and then lead to different strength type of gains that you might have as a goal. Which is kind of the key to some of these records. So like I have a modern record for two hands anyhow. The most weight done in that way that's at least been filmed and seen in person. There's a guy.
Explain that lift.
So that's where you hold two separate weights over your head and you get them up any way possible. So what I've done is a clean and jerk, which is picking the bar up off the ground, bring it to the chest, pushing it over your head, and then I transition to one arm in the middle. So now I'm holding the barbell with one arm, and then I bend over, pick up a kettlebell, clean that, and then press that overhead, and then that's the lift.
Fuck yeah. That's so hard, dude. That sounds so incredibly hard. And what was the record for that? How much weight did you throw up?
It was a 300-pound barbell and then a 75-pound kettlebell.
Damn. When did you do that?
That was a year and a half ago.
Have you seen anybody else try to dethrone you?
No, but there was a guy in Russia who...
of course it would be a Russian.
I have a lot of Eastern European friends on the internet.
I bet, bro.
It's so funny. But it's fun. I mean, that's kind of cool part about social media is you can meet people who like to do some of the things that you're into. So yeah, they had like a whole competition in Moscow, and he did 365.
Wow, that's a lot of weight. That's a lot of weight.
He's a big guy, like 300 pounds.
Yeah, that's the craziest thing about you, I think, is you're throwing up the weight. How much do you weigh? You're not like huge. No,
right now I'm like 215, 220.
Yeah. You're just a sturdy boy.
Yeah. I focus a lot on developing tension, which like I can't express this idea enough for developing strength. Is like the isometric movements of getting that like wrap with your shoulders, with your core, with your glutes, like that whole system of like if you think of like a barrel going around you and then wrapping that tighter, that is what I've really focused on developing for a long time now. So it allows me to do things that look like crazy, because it would be crazy if I wasn't able to do that, if I didn't have that foundation.
And how do you build that foundation? Like, how do you get to a point where you feel comfortable doing something like a Turkish get-up? Because most of us, over the age of 30 are probably worried about catching a back strain or something, like coming down off the floor and then getting up or something. How do you start to do the incremental movements as you were speaking about to start to do harder things like that? Are there exercises that are super conducive to building strength in that capacity, or what does that look like?
Yeah, there definitely are. And it's a lot about how you do the exercises. These are probably exercises that people have done, but I'll give you an example with a plank. And, we're not together now, but I'll just explain it and people can get on the floor and try it. So if you're in a push-up, top of a push-up position, you want to think about the upper part of your arm externally rotating and the lower part of your arm internally rotating. And those will fight each other about 50%. So that keeps your arm totally straight and locked out. Then you want to push the ground away, like fill up your upper back, almost like an angry cat. And then you take your pelvis and you want to tuck it under. So if you had a tail, it kind of tucks between your legs. Now you're in this like hollow position. And then you isometrically, which means putting force in without any movement, pull your hands towards your feet and your feet towards your hands. You'll feel that immediately light up your core. You'll probably start bending your elbows, so you have to remind yourself to keep them straight and pull back. Squeeze the glutes. And now every time you do a plank, if you keep all of that tension, over time, you'll be able to maintain that tension for longer. So an exercise that I used to do would be a plank pull, where I am kind of like in a normal plank that would, if I was in a group fitness class, the instructor would be like, okay, good. And then I add that isometric that no one can see, but I can really feel. And if you're doing it now, you know what I'm talking about. And then be able to maintain that tension throughout a push-up or throughout another type of movement. But it's those little details of that like torque and that rotation of where you're applying tension that helps you become safer. And you can do that through most exercises, like even a squat. As you're squatting down, you're trying to pull the ground apart with your feet and then twist, like you're twisting knobs. Doing that as you're bracing throughout your diaphragm, which is the lower part of your abdomen, kind of like if you had a weight belt on, that's going to keep you really stout and strong. And then once you have that, you test it by applying external load. So maybe if you're in your plank, you could have a buddy put some weight plates on your back and see when that back starts to arch and you start to stick your butt out. That's when you know you're at your max.
Do you have any resources for some of these workouts and lifts at all, whether it's on YouTube or any type of programming? Because I'm sure there are people who are interested, myself included, who are like, man, I've been in the gym for, 15, 20 years, maybe not 20, 15 years now. And I've been doing the same, 80 to 90% of the same lifts for all this time. Obviously, as we're talking about this, I've been trying to experiment and do different things, but there's so much that's I'm not familiar with that I'm green to. And some of these things that we're talking about that I'd love to try. Is there any resources that you have provided or created that people can kind of try this on their own?
I'm working on I'm gonna be doing more of that through my YouTube channel,
Okay.
where I'll do like tutorials on some of these lifts. But there's a couple people online that are doing a great job of that. One, his handle's Range of Strength. His name's Lucas, and then another one is Atlas Power Shrugged, and they go into kind of these odd movements and how they're beneficial, how they can increase your range of motion and your strength at the same time. And so yeah, I would definitely check them out.
Cool. So talk to me about when you made the transition from New York to Colorado and what was the idea behind that? Why did you make that move?
Yes, I went from New York to Costa Rica to Vermont to LA
Oh,
or just
shit.
to Colorado, but those were all kind of quick, like half a year times. But I wanted to get out of New York because at the time, I just wanted to be out in nature and I wanted to what I call like rehumanize myself. I felt like I didn't have I was losing a connection with my own spirit and my own soul, just not being able to like see the stars and be outside. And so it was great in a lot of ways. Like being in New York's good for business. There's a lot of opportunity. You can meet a lot of people, train people like Zendaya there, but it wasn't so good for me just internally. And so I found myself leaving and going to my buddy's surf camp in Costa Rica, like every 2 months and surfing for a week. And as the plan would land, I would see the trees and I'd start to cry because I was like, oh man, my spirit really needs this. And then eventually I didn't want to just constantly be moving away from my home and kind of was not necessarily dreading, but just not looking forward to coming back. And so I landed in Colorado eventually. I moved there with an ex-girlfriend from Encinitas, California, and just loved the mountains. Met my good buddy Eric Hinman around that time. And so we were training all the time in the CrossFit gym, not necessarily doing CrossFit. He was doing it more. I'm kind of like to do the things that CrossFitters aren't necessarily always great at, like the strict gymnastics work and the strongman stuff and the Olympic weightlifting, but we could still do similar things. And yeah, I love Colorado. I can't see myself leaving. I mean, I could, but at the same time, it has everything that I like here. I mean, I can look out right now and see the mountains and run to them from my front door. I feel really fortunate.
Yeah, you don't really strike me as a New York guy. How long were you in New York for?
I grew up in New York. So I grew
Okay.
up like 20 minutes north of the Bronx in Westchester County. And then I lived in Manhattan for 5 years.
Wow.
And yeah, New York's a great thing to have in your back pocket. If you ever need to pull out that like New York mentality and get some stuff done, it's awesome. And I love visiting New York. And I probably could see myself living there, if I had a lot of resources. But in my early 20s, I didn't have a lot of those resources. And so it was a tougher place for me to be. Although I do miss the community. Like there's so many amazing athletes and people there. And I think that's what keeps people in a big city is that community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went there this summer. My wife and I went for our baby moon, and I linked up with a bunch of those cats up there. They were doing the Summer Street series. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they just open up basically. I think it was one of the big avenues, like right uptown next to Manhattan or next to the park, and literally like 10 miles just down and back running through the city. It was so badass, and I've never had that much exposure to the city, but even just that, I'm like, damn, I always wish that I would have gotten like 1 to 2 years to just do the city for a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that would be a great amount of time. Like
Yeah.
you can even get a lot of it if you went there for a few months and like a
Yeah.
spring or a fall. Like you can get that city, that New York City feel. But that's cool that you did that. Was the route probably down Fifth Avenue that I used to
Yep.
bike. So I used to bike all the time from client to client in New York when I was doing a lot of yoga one-on-ones and personal training. Um, and that's really fun. Dangerous, but also really fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen the vlogs, like the Casey Neistat vlogs and shit. I'm like, holy, how do you do this on a daily basis without just getting murdered by a taxi or something? But so talk to me a little bit about your transition to mindset performance coaching. Obviously, sounds like you were more of the personal trainer capacity back in the day, and then maybe you made the transition, or maybe you always were a bit of a mindset coach, but now I know that with the offense, that's your primary focus. What has that looked like in building that over the years?
Yeah, so I've always been a coach. My kind of coaching history was in college. I went for physical education at first, transitioned to kinesiology. Then the New York Jets came to my college for training camp, and their strength coach was looking for some interns and asked our strength coach on the football team. And I was like, this is never want to do anything more in my life. Knocking
Mm,
at the door at 5 a.m. We built out this huge strength facility in the ice hockey arena with like 12 racks and a bunch of stuff for the training camp, which was a few months. And they never had an intern before, at least in that capacity. And so the strength coach was like, "You're not an intern, you're a coach. Go coach with Danian Tomlinson how to do kettlebell swings. Go coach Jason Taylor how to do scap push-ups," or like just thrown into it right away. Of course, I do other intern stuff, cook like the cleaning and making the protein shakes and all that. But it was awesome to be exposed to such a high level at such a young age. So I did that for 2 years. Then I went out to California and was working with a company called Athletes Performance, helping train guys for the NFL Combine. So, like the 40-yard dash, vertical jump, bench press, that facility really put out like all of the number one picks. And they would take a guy like Julio Jones, who maybe come in at a 4.6, and then he leaves at a 4.3 or a 4.4.
mm.
And that would make him, extra millions on his contract because he's drafted higher. But what I found I really loved, and I really found it out there, was that transition from the field, which was where we usually do the speed work first, and then we'd have to walk down in like through the arena into the weight room. And through that, you were talking to the guys about, their personal life or what they're nervous about, or left their friends at college, how they're trying to go to the league. There's a lot of internal struggles, and I really liked being able to support in that realm. And so that got me into yoga, that got me into positive psychology, that got me into studying all these different modalities. And I found that like the sets and the reps were interrupting some of the deeper work that I was really able to help people with. And so that's when I started offering that coaching in conjunction with the training. And now I do fully mindset performance coaching, which essentially my company's called The Offense, and we help people live a life of action and be aggressive on offense towards their biggest dreams and ambitions rather than playing defense, sitting in the back seat, kind of letting life happen to them. We take that proactive approach and use it under this culture of strength. So strong body, strong mind, and strong spirit.
I love the name, man. I love the name, the offense, and the whole concept behind it. Speak to, being a mindset coach, quote unquote. I've always been curious about mindset coaches in general. I've had coaches in different capacities in my life, business coaches, training, personal training coaches, things of that nature. Always been interested in a mindset coach, have never gone down that route. Speak to, like, I think there's this maybe preconceived notion of what a mindset coach is, and it's a little bit in my mind, I think a little bit like therapist, for lack of a better term, but it's obviously so much more than that. So talk to me kind of when somebody comes to you and wants to work with you, what exactly does that look like, and what value and aspects are you bringing into their life that maybe they're looking for, or maybe they don't even know what they're looking for, and you provide that for them?
Yeah, great question. Get this a lot, and this is honestly one of the biggest challenges as a coach because you're not getting a training program that then you go through. You're not getting a physical product, but what you are getting is different exercises and tools to help change your mindset that changes your life for the better. And so it can kind of sound kind of cliche, but it really can be a life changing and transformative. And I get on the phone a lot with clients after a few sessions, and I just had a guy the other day say, "Hey, I need to take these last few minutes to thank you. Like, I know we've only been 4 sessions in 1 month, but my life is completely different. I'm a completely different person than I was 4 months ago." And I can't speak for all mindset coaches, but I know for me, I don't like just giving people additional tasks to do and different exercises. I want to help them apply the things that they probably already know. And I'll make an analogy for training because this will probably resonate for you. If you want to get stronger and you've never worked out before, you go into the gym and you go into a globo gym, and there's hundreds of different machines, thousands of different exercise programs, and it can be really overwhelming knowing where to start. And so you work with a coach, and he looks at your training history, any injuries, what your goals are, what you struggle with, what you like, and builds you out a customized program that's based on science, based on you, and based on the results that you want to have. And that's the same thing I do with my mindset coaching. Someone comes in with some goals, some struggles, maybe some exercises that they like. And I have a tremendous toolbox from the decades of doing this, of all of these different exercises, tools, programs for going after things like burnout, lack of confidence, lack of self-esteem, wanting to become the strongest version of themselves, improve their relationship, communication, whatever it may be. And based on their history, how they communicate, I can provide the appropriate program to match them and then hold them accountable to taking an action that's going to elicit the goals that they're looking for. So it's hard to explain because people come in with different things, but they always leave feeling a lot better about themselves and more empowered to take action towards that life that they truly desire.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it is a little bit, because it's not direct, it's not like a straight up plan. Like for me, I'm a run coach, so I provide a running plan, or I provide a strength plan, or whatever that may be. Let's say somebody comes in and you've identified, maybe they're struggling in this capacity. I just would love some like examples of some things, if you don't mind sharing, because I'm so curious about this and it's something I'm interested in too. Would you say, you encourage them to like do daily journaling and then, create more structure in their life and then do this workout, and like, what does that exactly look like? I'd like to know a little bit more in detail.
Yeah. So just like running or strength training, you have the exercises that are, usually like going to be more beneficial than others. If someone wants to get stronger legs, doing just a mini band every day is not going to do it compared to like back squatting and deadlifting. You're going to get more benefit from that. And so there are similar ones in mindset coaching. One is a word that you used and a lot of people use. And this word is what I call a gray word, and it takes people away from what they truly desire and puts it more externally. That's a problem I see often, is people don't know, like, what is my purpose? What is my path? What do I truly care about? Is this the right answer for me? And a word that I hear used often is should. I should work out more. I should have a breathwork practice. I should journal. I should meditate. I should work with a coach. I should whatever. And all those shoulds, again, are external and are clouding your own inner ability to listen to what it is that you truly desire and want. And so if you're living your life by the shoulds, you're kind of capping yourself at maybe 80% of your best potential. And so if someone comes in and they're feeling anxious or questioning themselves or lacking confidence, usually they're using that word should. And I have an intake process that kind of looks at some of these things, so I can kind of tell before I even talk with them what might be coming up. But an exercise would be eliminating the word should from your vocabulary and inserting the words want or don't want. And what that does is it forces you to take ownership over your language, forces you to make decisions. That's going to force you to take ownership over your actions and then ownership over the life that you're living. And so a silly example would be maybe you and your wife, like, what should we have for dinner? Versus I want to eat a steak and she wants to eat Chinese food, right? I'm just making it up. And so you will compromise. You'll be okay, maybe we have, Chinese food tonight, or we make Chinese food at home because I don't like eating out with the oils and stuff like that. And then maybe tomorrow we can have steak, versus you saying, not expressing what it is that you want, and saying, okay, we can have Chinese. Now, you don't get to express your true desires over time. That kind of sits within you, builds resentment subconsciously, and then it can come out in these weird other ways that create more angst with the person that you're closest to.
This is kind of a buzzword in space, but it kind of reminds me. I'm rereading Atomic Habits right now, which is a great book. And one of the things that I'm working on personally is being more intentional with the things that I want to do. Right, not things that I should do, but that I want to do. And one of the things it speaks to is like calling it out and speaking it instead of just thinking it. For example, like, you know, when the dishwasher is clean, I'm going to literally, and you say this to yourself, like, I'm gonna empty the dishwasher, put everything away before I sit down for dinner or whatever. It sounds like that's similar to, it's obviously not in a great match, but it's similar to what you're saying, is just like being more intentional with the wants and the needs that you have instead of the gray space, so to speak. Because if you're thinking it and you're like, yes, I should do these things, I know I should do them, but you're not being intentional and providing a clear route to accomplish it or get it done, it's maybe not the best space to be in.
Totally. It's just like running. If you're going to run an ultra marathon, you can't just like kind of run, you got to put it in. If you want to live the best life or have the best relationships, you can't be focused on expectations for what you think is going to happen. You have to create agreements for how you will handle that, relationship and your communication, and then stick to those agreements. So oftentimes people just focus on, we live in our own heads and we tell ourselves these stories all the time. And that can be really great in terms of, when you're trying to get through motivation through a hard workout or a race or something like that. But it can be detrimental if you're not careful on what that story is. And so saying it out loud, like 10x's its power. And so really, if you're using that positively, it's going to 10x it in a great way. And it can also go into a negative way as well.
For those people, like kind of what you said, that are functioning at half their capacity or lower capacity than what they're truly capable of, this 60-70% of what they could be at 100% of their potential, where do you think most people struggle? And I'm speaking specifically about folks that are in our age group, maybe 30s to 40s, who feel like they have more potential, more to give, but maybe they're not hitting what they want to, or they're not achieving those goals that maybe they want to. Where do you feel like most of those folks, at least the folks that you work with, where do you start with them, and where do you think they're going wrong for the most part?
I think it's a lack of clarity. I think a lot of people want to work really hard. They just don't know where to put that energy. And there's, again, so many external distractions. So if you're wanting to listen to your own truth, but you're constantly scrolling social media, watching other people with their own truth, it clouds your own vision for what it is that you want. And so I can think of myself sometimes as a reducer in terms of ways, like I help people reduce the things that they don't care about first so that they can create space for the things that they do care about. And so I do a lot of that through values exercises, of getting clear on what are your values, how much time are you spending outside of those values. And if that's a lot of time, then there's an incongruency with your own personal integrity, which is going to lead to feelings of self-doubt. And so by closing that gap, you'll have a lot more confidence and be able to use all of that energy towards the things that you really want to do and have the confidence to do that.
How much of your program is focused around physical training and doing hard things?
Not a lot. No,
Okay.
Almost none of it, to be honest. Okay. Yeah, a lot of people come in wanting that, and that's a great goal. I mean, I love to do hard things and push myself physically too, but that's usually a means, at least what I find with my clients, is they use that as a mask for not wanting to do this other type of work. And this other work is vulnerable communication, deeper inner work that is scary. They don't know it as well. It's tough to feel the benefits. Like when you come back from a hard tempo run, like you feel the benefits. You're huffing, puffing, sweating, like you did something. And when you maybe say something vulnerable or have an emotional conversation, you probably feel like not the best afterwards. There's a little bit of like an emotional hangover. And so it's tough mentally to view that as a strong thing. And that's the coin that I try to flip for a lot of folks. I run this men's group at my house. For anyone that lives in Colorado wants to come, just let me know. I smoke up like 40 pounds of meat, and we all sit outside in a circle in my backyard. Everyone brings a camping chair, and I call it emotional fitness. And we practice expressing our feelings. And so I give everyone a feelings chart, which is just the sheet of paper that has like 50 different feelings on it. And you look at the chart, and you go reflect over your week, and you practice expressing some emotions that you don't always get the space in regular life to practice. And each person gets 3 to 4 minutes to share, or they can pass. And there's no phones, no one's recording anything, no one's giving any advice. Everyone's just listening to what someone else has to share, and we go around the circle. And so that's a great exercise for people to practice expressing themselves, because if you're not feeling seen or understood by someone that's close to you, often it's easy to point the finger at that person, like, you don't get me, you don't understand me. And the thing I will do as a coach is help them point the finger back. Well, are you giving them the best opportunity to see you, to understand you in a way that they can understand? Because we understand things in our own heads, but your partner or your friends aren't in your head. And so you have to express it in a way that makes sense to them. And if your emotional vocabulary is only happy, mad, and sad, then if you're frustrated, that's just going to go to mad. And they're not going to be able to understand your frustration. You're not going to feel understood from them. And it's going to, hurt that relationship.
Man, that's powerful. That's powerful, because I'm just thinking about how it relates to my own life. I mean, shit, I couldn't tell you the last time, I shared how I felt with anybody other than my wife. You know what I'm saying? There's just not a lot of opportunity. There's not a lot of open forum or dialogue for that to happen. And I think there's incredible power in that. So that's really cool to hear you speak to that. It sounds like you do obviously in-person events at your house. Is it all typically online for the most part for the majority of your clients, or what does that look like? And then how long do you usually work with them? What is the term, quote unquote?
Yeah, so it's all virtual. And I do all phone calls, no video calls. Reason for that is I want to take away the observer effect. So I don't want them to feel like I'm watching them looking at themselves, judging themselves. I want them to be on the phone with their eyes closed, deeply thinking and coming into a space, a heart-centered space. I call this like the longest road any of us will take is the 18 inches from the head to the heart. And so we want to travel that road, and it can be difficult to do if you do Zooms all day or you're on the computer. And so I start all clients with 2-month commitment. We'll do 1 phone call per week. I have a coaching app that'll upload notes, different assignments, tasks, whatever it is that is coming up for them into. And then I'll hold them accountable to those tasks throughout the week. So checking in to make sure they had the difficult conversation, or like they did the hot bath, or there's all these different things. It's really depending upon what someone's looking for. Like the hot bath's an example from maybe someone who finds it difficult to spend time with themselves alone, and they'll justify it by, I listen to a lot of podcasts or audiobooks. I'm always like to be learning and pushing myself, and which are great things as long as that's not a crutch for not being comfortable being completely alone. And so something I might prescribe would be a lights off, candle lit, no phones, no music, like 45-minute bath 2 times a week. And then after the bath, reflecting on what came up, what didn't come up. Was it easy? Was it hard? Did you enjoy it? Allowing the heat of the water, maybe the salts to, bring up some things. And that's been really powerful. And people know oftentimes that this is something that they should do, but they don't do it. And so when you're investing in a coach, you're putting your money where your mouth is. And now you're going to go take those actions. And those actions are going to lead to deeper realizations, maybe an understanding that there's some more room for me to love myself. And I'm not this amazing CEO that makes millions of dollars a year and has all these multiple homes. Like, that's part of me, but there's this other part that I want to really work on as well. And it's just not as mainstream to work on that.
I want to talk about your personal journey and going back to the doing hard things. we linked up at Leadville training camp this year, which was phenomenal to link up with the guys and go out there and get some miles on the course. You did something exponentially harder than just running Leadville 100, and you did the Lead Man. For anybody listening that's not familiar with that, can you share what the Lead Man is?
Yeah, so Leadville is, I'm sure you've talked about it a bunch, actually, I know you have, is a 100-mile run race, but they have a lot of different races in the Leadville race series. So they have a trail marathon, a 50-mile run, 50-mile mountain bike, a 100-mile mountain bike, a 10K, and then the 100 run. And if you do all of those races, it's under the Lead Challenge or the Lead Man challenge. And so
6 of them?
I think you officially have to do 5. You don't have to do both 50s. But there was some kind of, I was in a circle that was tough. That was like, well, in order to be a true Lead Man and like for the Leadville locals, you got to do both. And my ego at the time was like, all right, fine. I'll just do both. Like, what's a 50-mile bike? You know, like that'll be fun, which it was. But so this year, it was really difficult because in previous years, the marathon and the 50-mile had a 2-week break between them. So you got some like 14 days to recover. But there was also a lot of snow because the trail marathon goes up to 13,000 plus feet. So in Colorado, there's snow there in June. And in mid-June to late June is a big difference. Like those 2 weeks, a lot of that snow can melt off. And so 2 years ago, there was a ton of snow. They were trying to dig it out. They had to do a completely different route. And so this past year, when I did it, they pushed it. So it was back-to-back weekends. So you did the trail marathon, which was over 6,000 feet of vert, really beautiful. But then the next weekend was the 50-mile trail run. And then the next day was the 50-mile mountain bike ride. And so doing those back-to-back was challenging for sure. And then I think like 3.5 weeks later is the 100-mile mountain bike ride. The next day is the 10K, which is kind of funny to see all the other people in the Lead Challenge kind of getting out there and trying to run after just doing the mountain bike. And then 5 days later is what we both did, the 100-mile run.
Yeah, man. And I know that in 2023, you ran the Leadville 100 run and hit a DNF. Similar to what happened to me this year. What happened to you in 2023? What would you kind of attribute the DNF? What was the biggest thing that kind of took you out?
Yeah, so that was the year I started long distance running. I was always an anaerobic athlete, so like football, weightlifting, very short, fast, powerful. But again, my buddy Eric Hinman, we had kind of had opposite backgrounds. Like he had a really endurance background. He was always talking to me about zone 2 and the Maffetone method. And I was always talking to him about like tension and tempo squats and getting stronger. And so like he took that on earlier than I took on the long-term aerobic training. But I got into it in October of that year and then got a wild hair to sign up for the race in February. And at the end of the day, I didn't hit the time cutoff at mile 62. And so what that means is there's this big Hope Pass in the middle of the race where you have to traverse up and over this big mountain, come down the backside, run out to a small, like a super small mining town called Winfield, and then come back. And then I was so nervous because I never ran a 100-mile race before that in my mind, I was saving energy for the back half of the race. And everyone was telling me don't go out too fast. And so I didn't. But then I got to Winfield with like 5 minutes left of the cutoff, had to turn around and hustle up this mountain. And after running 50 plus miles, there was no hustling up a mountain. As a bigger guy too, it takes me a little bit of time to go uphill. And so pretty much right at the top of Hope Pass, I was like looking at my watch, trying to do this math during the middle of the race, which is, it's downhill when that's happening. And to realize like, I'm not going to make it. Like, I'm not going to be able to, even if I was fresh, I couldn't run down and get to the aid station in time. And so I had a little dark moment, had some tears in this beautiful place at the top of Hope Pass. And and then just slowly made my way back down in the dark. to my crew and my family who took all the time to come out there and support me. And, you know, I know that you probably resonate with this to some degree, like feel bad that, you know, people are coming out there and it didn't go as well as you wanted it to. And then a few weeks after the race, I signed up for another 100-mile run, Javelina. And once I did that one and I was able to complete that, then I was like, let me double down into the lead challenge next year. Because like I love mountain biking. In my mind, which I do think is true, those races before kind of prep you for the 100-mile run. So I'm fortunate to live 2 hours from Leadville, so it doesn't cost a ton of money for me to travel up there to do it. But yeah, that's what happened the year before. Basically went out too slow.
I was going to ask, you kind of answered it, if the DNF had anything to do with you kind of doubling down and deciding, not only do I want to do the 100-mile run, but I want to do Leadman, the whole gamut. Not only do I want to go run 100 miles, but I want to get I believe it's like a badass pickaxe that they give you if you get Leadman or something, but just deciding like, I want to run the gamut. I want to do all of these. It's not too far from me. It's 2 hours away, so I can go train on the weekends when I need to. I mean, it's just a huge commitment. And I know that you have a family and it's a lot of time away. And I'm just curious about your mindset and deciding like, hey, I'm going to pull the trigger and not only do just this one hard thing that I failed at and accomplish that, but I'm going to do the whole gamut, this plethora of different things. And I'm going to crush all of them.
Yeah. It's those stories, man. The stories we tell ourselves, the things that motivate us. Something I think about a lot and talk a lot about with clients is like playing bigger and not playing too small. And I think a lot of times people want to play things safe, and that's too safe. Like it's not motivating enough. I want to call people up. I want to call myself up and put something on the calendar that's really audacious and scary, because it requires me to kind of get my poop in a group more or less and focus on what it is I want to do. And I can't mess around or have any room to procrastinate. And so that's what it was there. I'm like, you know what? I didn't do it this year. I was really upset because I felt like I had the fitness. I felt like it was a strategy error. And so I was like, well, it's crazy. You run 100K with like, I think it was like 12,000 feet of vert. And afterwards, I'm like frustrated and, you know, upset. But at the same time, happy for all my friends who finished that race and, you know, did their thing. But I went to the finish line the next day and watched everyone cross the line, had my sunglasses on. I was crying. I was like, you know, again, happy and sad. And, you know, I was like, I'm going to come back. I'm going to do this next year. I'm going to use this as motivation. And it was great.
Yeah. In hindsight, what I took away from it was truly, and I mean every bit of this, it was one of the best things that happened to me in hindsight, because I learned so much about myself and about what I need to do better moving forward, and not only my own training, but in training my clients and the right coaching approach, and making sure that I don't let anybody, again, including myself, again, like overtrain or do any of these things. What was your takeaway from it? Were you just kind of grateful for the experience and use that to fuel you?
Yeah, it's, you know, these long mountainous ultra races, you can't, nothing, things are going to be going wrong. And that's what I love about them, is it's like a constant puzzle to try to solve. And it's similar to these other lifts. It's similar to the way I work with clients. Everything is like nothing goes completely to plan. And being able to adapt is really fun. I love that type of challenge. And so I was excited to go back to have another attempt at this puzzle. And I feel like I have the tools in order to complete the puzzle. And I have to like be on with those tools. I can't have like an off day. I have to be like ready to go. And so that puts more pressure on and keeps me in that flow state where, you know, flow state gets a ton of talk. I'm sure you might have talked about in this podcast, but I'll quickly define it in terms of positive psychology, which is where it's from and where I have some background. Is if you think of a graph, on one axis is your skill and on the other is the challenge. And so you want the challenge to be high enough to require all of your skill. That way you're in flow. If I told you, Chase, your challenge is to run 1 mile at a 12-minute pace, you're going to be bored because that's too easy for your skill. But if I told you you're going to run 100 miles in Leadville, Next year, that is a high challenge for your skill, and you're going to be in flow. Your training's going to be focused. Your mindset's going to be focused. You're going to pick up every stone and look under it to see what can happen, and you're going to feel fulfilled by that. And so it's easy to make flow state analogies with training, and becomes really cool when you can make those with life based on like conversations or work obligations or different things like that.
Do you talk a lot about that with your clients, is like trying to find a flow state to just kind of live in a multi-week to multi-month to like yearly basis? Is that a thing?
Definitely. Yeah. And I like the mantra, practice everything. Like you were talking about doing the dishes. And so, you can do the dishes, or you can practice putting the dishes away and practice loading the dishwasher. That's a great one, right? Because I've seen all those memes of like one partner loads it like this, the other partner loads it like that.
Oh yeah. I get shit every time for doing it wrong.
And what I would suggest to you if you were a coaching client would be, next time you do the dishes, just practice. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be like your wife does it. Just try to be, again, 1% better than you did it last time. And that will put into your mind to do that in all areas of your life. And it's easy to think about it with training because you get all these metrics, but it's harder in terms of like putting the dishes away or cleaning up the house or even getting dressed or brushing your teeth or whatever it can be. You can bring more presence and awareness, and I just like the word practice through that versus doing. Then you have more intention throughout your life, which is going to lead to a more fulfilling life.
I love that. I'm stealing it. I love it because I'm just thinking about practicing in my daily, one, to make my wife happy about the dishes, amongst other things that I need to practice more. But two, every single time I get on a coaching call, which is just a Zoom call, I have an opportunity to practice and become a better coach through how I'm talking to my clients and how I'm working through them. And to anybody in corporate America, like, you just reframe. You just kind of reframe, reset how you're thinking about it. You're like, I get to practice being a better salesperson today or a better manager today, whatever it is. And just that subtle change gets you a little bit more fired up about it. I don't know what it is, but I love that. I'm stealing it.
Yeah, steal it, man. Yeah, I think it can take the pressure off because we all hold ourselves to such a high expectation again, and we live, most of us, with a lot of these shoulds for the way we should be as a father or a friend or whatever. And if we're not doing that and we're comparing ourselves to someone else's perfect highlight reel online or movie or whatever it is, then it's ultimately going to bring us down, and we're not going to want to try to be better. But if you can have that personal mantra of, I just am practicing life. So I practice how I play with my kids. I practice how I kiss my wife. I practice how I do whatever. Then through that practice, you are intentional and you will improve.
Beautifully said. Coming up on an hour here, so I want to start shutting it down. Last question for you. Anything else you really have on the horizon as far as what you're training for? Any big races coming up? Are you still running hundreds? What's that looking for for you right now?
So nothing on the calendar. A month after Leadville, there was this 100-mile race from Flagstaff, Arizona to the Grand Canyon that I signed up for. And I thought in my head, I'm like, because I completed the 100-mile run in Leadville, but I didn't complete it in the time. So like that's kind of on the docket. Like there is some unfinished business there in terms of what I want to complete. I'm not sure if that's something I'll do next year. That would be like a family decision because, like you said, there's a lot that goes into that. So Kelly and I kind of started those conversations, but I haven't made my PowerPoint presentation yet, and she hasn't made hers. So we'll go into that in a little bit. But I signed up for that one race, went to it at mile 32. Kind of had this like realization of like, what am I doing? Like, this is a month out. Like, I don't want to do this. My body was like, no, stop. It was raining. Like mud was caked on our feet. And I knew it would just be like a mental grind to finish it. And then I knew the recovery that was going to come from that, which would be really long. And I didn't want to put myself through that. I didn't want to put my family through that. And I wind up DNFing that race also at mile 35. And so at the moment, I'm focusing on getting stronger. that was definitely something that I would change if I could go back 2 years ago to when I started running, would be to continue strength training. I can have an all or nothing kind of mentality, which is the work that I'm focused on. And if I can't be like giving it all of that in the gym, then I'm like, let me just give it all to running. And my muscular endurance, so like that 12 to 20 rep range, is something that I have a lot to improve on. And so that is ultimately something that I'll probably start doing more of. But right now, I'm building more of that foundational strength, kind of like, raising the floor so the ceiling can raise up higher as well. And then I'll start to build the muscular endurance on top of that. And then I'm sure around the springtime, I'll probably a little bit before, start kind of running again, start riding my bike, and, who knows what will shake out.
I have to give you props on I didn't know that you ran another 100 so quickly after Leadville. I must have missed that. I don't remember seeing anything about that. It's weird to say I'm giving you props for a DNF, but like, if it's not serving you, what the fuck are you doing out there in the first? You know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes we just have this feeling of like, I got to keep checking the box. I got to do the next challenge. And we don't see the downstream effects that it's having on our family, on our personality, like on how we treat our family, on our personality, on how we treat our clients, all these things. And if it's not serving you, then you need to be big enough to say, okay, I can check my ego at the door and I can DNF, because who the fuck cares? It's like, I don't care about my DNF record. I care about what's serving me in the moment and what's going to serve me down the line. And kind of realizing that is huge. So I have to give props to you, man, because that's something like I've battled with in the past too, is like, I have to maintain this record. I have to be perfect. I have to do this. I have to do that. And that's all just made up in our own heads.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know I'm tough. I know I can grind through stuff. I know I can push through stuff. I don't need to prove that to myself, or I don't feel like I need to prove that to anyone else. Because I don't necessarily need people's props. Like it's nice, but I'm really working on like building that internal love for myself and finding that internal motivation. And so it was cool on this race, to be honest. At mile 30, I was kind of like coming to this realization, had this like light bulb moment where I'm like, I'm enough. I don't need to just grind myself into the ground. Like, I'm good. I want to focus on some other things, and that's totally fine. So, but I wouldn't have learned that if I didn't put myself out there and try to do that race. And I'd only ran like 5 miles at one time between Leadville and that other race. And ultimately, I think that's why a lot of us want to do these races, is you learn a lot about yourself. Like the conversations that I have in my own head at mile 80 to mile 100 of a 100-mile race, I can't have those at any other time ever. No matter psychedelics, whatever it is, it's a different type of conversation that you have to earn it. And I think there's something to be said for putting yourself in a position to have a conversation that you really earned.
100%. You meet a different version of yourself on the other side of those miles, man. Like, I always, when my first 100, I was like, I want to meet the version of myself beyond 50 miles, because that was like my biggest training run. And as you said, like those conversations you're having at 80, 90, 95, 98, when you're so close, it's when you really get a sense of who you are, and you can surprise yourself sometimes, which is pretty cool. So, hey, I appreciate you coming on, brother. If anybody's interested in following you, checking your stuff out, or interested in potentially reaching out about the offense, where should they do so?
Theoffense.co is the offense website. The.offense is the Instagram handle. My Instagram handle is Mike Aidala. I do one-on-one coaching, and I'm doing group coaching. I'm launching a group at the beginning of the new year. And so this is the 101, live an offensive life, take action towards your biggest dreams and ambitions. If that's something you're interested in, would love to talk to you more about the group.
Cool, brother. I appreciate you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Chase.
Yes, sir. That's the pod. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please do us a favor and subscribe, like, comment, share, all of the above. We're trying to reach more people who are interested in that casually ambitious lifestyle, and you're going to help us do it. Thank you so much. Again, we appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next one.